As a gamer in my mid-30s, and someone who has religiously been playing video games as their primary hobby for more than 20 years, I have run the gamut over these past few decades with the various genres I've run through. I ran through a cascade of platformers and side-scrollers in my early days on the Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis, opened up to a whole new world of adventures on the Nintendo 64 and PlayStation 2, partnered up with many new friends in my multiplayer heavy days on the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 4, and now I currently reside in my land of open world epics and cozy indie resting places on the PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X, and PC. But one thing that has remained a constant throughout all of those eras has been my love for Japanese RPGs. As is the case for most JRPG enthusiasts, my first exposure was through the biggest franchise that doesn't consist of a young child cycling from town to town with a bunch of mascots in tow in pursuit of tiny badges that look nothing more than $5 trinkets at Hot Topic, Final Fantasy. The first time I got my hands on Final Fantasy IV, or at the time in North America, Final Fantasy II, because, well, back in those days, Japanese gaming publishers didn't think we were smart enough to play all of their games. And shit, we got it good compared to other regions. We started with 1, skipped to 4 and 6, and then never looked back. You know what the first game in the franchise was that Europe got? Final Fantasy Mystic Quest, and then they didn't see a bloody thing until Final Fantasy VII. The dark days of the 90s aside, Final Fantasy has always remained a constant for me throughout my gaming years, for better or worse. Up until the 2000s, the franchise really could do no wrong with me, full CG films aside. Even games that the fanbase generally aren't too fond about, like 10-2 and 7 Dirge Cerberus, still brought joy to me when I played them. My fondness for the franchise did start to dip in the 2000s, however, as my first foray into online gaming with Final Fantasy XI didn't go very well, and even the critically acclaimed Final Fantasy XIV, while miles better, still has never grabbed me past its free trial. Final Fantasy XII had its moments, but I honestly couldn't tell you much about it aside from the visual aspects of the world and its characters. And then came 2010 with Final Fantasy XIII. This game was really the start of my downward spiral with Square Enix as a whole, and I can firmly say that since 2010, I haven't flat out loved a Square Enix release apart from 2 games. Final Fantasy VII Remake, which I almost immediately want to disqualify as there's already sentimental value going in, and Kingdom Hearts 3, which while I loved, I can easily admit that it's not exactly a memorable game either. When my happy days with Final Fantasy were running free before 2010, it only made my gaming experience even better when you had other classic JRPGs floating in the ether such as Chrono Trigger, Super Mario RPG, and Persona 4, along with other franchises that I have attachments to like Phantasy Star, Breath of Fire, Suikoden, and Shadow Hearts to name a few. But from 2010 onwards, with Final Fantasy, or Square Enix as a whole for that matter, completely out of my scope, there was a massive hole open for a while. It began to be filled with more Western RPGs, like Mass Effect and The Witcher 3. Sure, there was the odd JRPG still in my library, like Persona 5, Fire Emblem Awakening, and Monster Hunter World, but generally speaking, JRPGs were no longer a regular part of my gaming experience. They were now being relegated as a minor genre in my library, with open-world epics like Grand Theft Auto 5, Red Dead Redemption 2, God of War, and Horizon Zero Dawn taking center stage. But finally, in 2018, that all completely changed when I came across a franchise that would completely shift me back into the genre I once loved more than anything else, and showed me that not only were JRPGs back for me, but better than ever before. The game was called Trails of Cold Steel, the first game in a new arc as a part of the Trails series, or Kiseki as it's known in Japan, which is also the active series belonging to another franchise known as The Legend of Heroes, though the Trails series has been the lone series with releases since 2004. I honestly don't remember what possessed me to buy this game originally. My best guess is that I saw a Reddit thread about hidden gems in the JRPG genre, and that's what I hopped onto, but I really can't say for certain. Regardless of why I decided to try the game, it was clearly the best decision I could have ever made. The game starts off pretty basic, especially if you're familiar with your typical JRPG or anime about high school age kids. You start off as Reen Schwarzer, a first-year student at a military academy. Naturally, you're a special kind of student, so you get put into a very special class with the other special students at the academy and are given special lessons apart from the rest of the school. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, game, I get it. I'm special. The early portions of the game, while I was interested, I really didn't consider myself hooked. The setting didn't appear to be anything too unique, and your classmates, aka your party members, were all very anime tropey. You got your bookworms, you got your super serious martial arts masters, and other tropes, but most importantly, you, the protagonist, are the heroic goody two-shoes who is blissfully unaware of how every female with a pulse around him wants to jump his bones, which of course means that right away, we need to develop a tsundere character because of course we do. What did first grab my attention though was the combat. It's turn-based with some tactical elements, such as the grid system that accounts for your movement and how you target your spells and crafts, whether it's a single enemy, a line attack, or a circular area. As the game progresses though, what I really found myself loving was just how broken you can make your characters with the various accessories and quartzes. That's materia to you Final Fantasy fans. The two biggest examples for me were Reen in Cold Steel 1 and 2, and Kurt from Cold Steel 3 and 4. Reen's default Master Quartz allows him to recover CP, or craft points, by killing enemies, but later in the game you can also equip accessories that increase how much CP he recovers, as well as an accessory that just has him automatically recover CP each turn, not just his turn, but everyone's turns. Couple that with a quartz that makes his first attack deal double damage, and you have a character who can one-shot an entire fight and it costs you nothing, because you recover it all back. Kurt, on the other hand, his Master Quartz allows you to deal massive damage if you evade an attack. Well, by the end of the game, you can essentially turn his evasion to near 100% and equip a quartz that guarantees critical damage whenever you counter an attack. So put him in the front and watch him absolutely obliterate anything that tries to hit him. So the combat's going very well. My interest is definitely peaked, but in order for this game to truly grab me, the story was going to need to pick up. And boy does it ever. Cold Steel does a very good job at developing a story that features a class war between the noble faction and the commoners beneath them. There's a lot of us versus them, military and political struggles with so much backstabbing and deplorable acts going on behind the scenes. And that's not even counting the terrorist faction trying to undo everything and plunge the nation into complete disarray. Oh, and we can't forget about the secret society underneath all that that's got their own mystical objectives that involve centuries of history and forbidden magic, because of course we can't have high schoolers just fighting nobles and soldiers. Oh no, we have to make sure they're fighting gods and demons as well. What kind of game do you think we are? But you may hear all that and you'd think it would be an absolute mess of tropes, cliches, and driveled nonsense, but it's the complete opposite. While the beginning of the first game starts off a bit slow, it's intentional, as the game needs that time to get you completely entrenched in the town of Trista and Thor's military academy. By the time you're going out of the town on your first field trip, you've had plenty of opportunities to get to know your protagonist, his classmates, the teachers, and all of the other NPCs, whether it's the rest of the student body or the townspeople. And this is where the series truly shines. I've never played a game where I become so invested into not just the important characters to the story, but the random townspeople that have zero effect on it, yet there's just enough going on with them that there's something to gravitate towards. Without spoiling too much, I'll note two examples within the Cold Steel arc as a whole, one of them being a relationship that spawns all 4 games, between 2 students that start out as them being childhood friends that moved away from each other and reunited the academy. They start out friendly, and as the arc progresses, it's clear they both have feelings for each other. But the dark turn in the country puts that relationship on the back burner, and you keep coming across either of the two and see the sheer amount of stress it's putting on them. While on the flip side, there's a very minor NPC who gets killed during the arc, and even though they really had no real integral part to the overall story, their death signifies a clear shift of tone and hit me hard as it comes out of nowhere. And that's the key with these games. I genuinely care about everything and everyone in this series. Whether it's Cold Steel in the Erebonian Empire, the Sky series in the Kingdom of Liberl, and the Zero/Azure games in the city-state of Crossbell, all 3 arcs have their own dedicated characters, setting, and story that have their own twists and turns, filled to the brim with people and moments that genuinely touched me. And they aren't limited to the new characters in each arc. Since the games take place on the same continent in a short time period of just 5 years as of the end of Cold Steel, these stories intertwine. Stories from the first arc of Sky don't completely resolve in that series. One specific character finally sees the climax of their story in the first of 2 Crossbell games. Literally 2 characters that have been in the series since the first Sky game get engaged and marry 8 full games later, at the end of the final Cold Steel game. It's unbelievable that a series after 9 games and 3 arcs are still resolving storylines from the very beginning, and it's nowhere near completed yet. As of July 7, 2023, a new game called Trails into Reverie was released in North America that aims to completely resolve the arcs from Crossbell and Erebonia. And there are already 2 games featuring the Republic of Calvard, another unvisited nation, that have been released in Japan called Trails in the Dark or Kuro no Kisaki. This story is long and ongoing, with no signs of slowing down. And this is where the conversation delves into starting points for players. The series in terms of fully translated English releases is at 10 games. The Sky series, which is 3, Zero and Azure, the 2 Crossbell games, and Cold Steel at 4 games, with Reverie serving, as IGN put it in their review of the game, the Avengers Endgame of the Trail series. It's a daunting series to pick up if you're aware of the sheer size. At the time I tried Cold Steel, I wasn't aware of the Sky games, and at the time the Crossbell games still hadn't even been localized and released for English-speaking audiences yet. I only saw the 2 games released for Cold Steel at the time, so keeping up with that series wasn't too difficult. But if you look online, you'll see threads of people looking for new JRPGs to play, and when the topic of Trails comes up, you have the argument of what the correct starting point is. Most will say you absolutely have to start from the beginning of the timeline with the Sky series, and it's an understandable thing to say. The Cold Steel games being the newest full arc constantly reference the prior 2 arcs, especially once you get to the 3rd game. However, I don't believe it's a good way to get people into a series of games by telling them that they have to start from the very beginning and work their way up a now 10-game ladder. It scares off casual players who could potentially become part of the Trails family. I know if I had asked somewhere where to start, I would have possibly abandoned ship had I been told that. Playing blissfully unaware of the 5 other games I would need to play to understand the entire story made it easy to get hooked, so I wouldn't have any issue playing said 5 games later down the line. And that's kinda where I fall when it comes to how to start the Trail series. So if you're interested in the series at all, and why wouldn't you be if you're still watching this video after listening to me go on and on already, here's my suggestion to you. Check out a gameplay trailer of the Trails in the Sky. If the older gameplay and lack of voice acting outside of the battle system doesn't bother you, then I'd start there. But if you're looking to play something a little more recent and with a little more polish on it, you can very easily start with Cold Steel 1 and 2, as those stories don't particularly reference the previous 2 arcs all that much, so you won't be too confused. Also, the tone of the series, unless it's changed in Reverie, which I have yet to play at the time of this recording, appears to be how the games will be styled going forward, as they are definitely the most anime of the arcs. If Cold Steel hooks you, and the over-the-top anime tropes don't scare you off, you'll have no issues going forward, and honestly, stopping at Cold Steel 2 is a decent spot to go back and play the previous games to get more backstory on the couple of years prior. But also, don't feel like you have to play these past games either. You can easily read a plot synopsis, or watch a YouTube video to get a decent summary if you don't want to go back and play another 150 plus hours of content. Yes, Trails fans, I know you're probably seething and typing out your comments right now, but let's be honest, so long as you start on the first game of any of the 3 arcs, that's a perfectly fine starting point. In fact, I would argue that playing Cold Steel first actually made playing Sky and Zero/Azure a really interesting experience as well for me. Seeing how characters came to be, where the origins of certain events and places came from, it was a really cool alternative rather than playing from the beginning of the timeline and working my way forward. I don't think there's a wrong arc to start with. You could conceivably start at Crossbell, then go back to Sky, and then work on Cold Steel and still get a really good experience out of it. So as I'm recording this right now, I've just finished playing Trails to Azure, and we'll be getting set to play Trails into Reverie and officially close all 3 arcs before going back to waiting for the next English release with the new Calvard arc of Trails in the Dark. Or maybe these arcs won't be fully closed, but I fully anticipate seeing Estelle, Lloyd, Green, and all of their companions, and even NPCs within those 3 arcs, in this new arc as well at some point. And it's incredible to think that once I'm done Reverie, I'll have played 10 games where the story all intertwines. Final Fantasy games don't do this. Persona doesn't really do this. No JRPG comes even close to my knowledge with this level of world building and storytelling. And Zemuria is just a single continent, and we haven't even been everywhere on the continent yet. I would love to visit Northumbria, Remiferia, Le Mans State, and the holy city of Arteria in the near future. So long as this quality of storytelling continues, I can see myself looking forward to the next games in this series into my 40s and beyond. Because as of today, I have never played a series that has hooked me as strongly as the Trail series has, and quite honestly, I'm not sure another series can come along and do this as well as Falcom has. Hell, I'm not even sure any other company would have the patience to even try this. So if you're a JRPG enthusiast and are looking for the next long-form game to spend hours and hours with, give it a go. Honestly, you could start with Trails in the Sky, Trails from Zero, or Trails of Cold Steel as a starting point, and you'll be good to go. And if there's anything I've missed, whether a question you may have, or a point that I haven't made, let me know in the comments, though please try to avoid spoilers. I hope you all enjoyed this video, my first attempt at a radical rant here on the Pixelplay YouTube channel. This has been something I've been wanting to do for quite some time now, but I hadn't found the right topic to get me to break out and put together a video. And it seems fitting that the topic to do so is the series that has been the best part of my gaming time for the past few years. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a 10th game to play. I have corrupt politicians to overthrow, criminals to arrest, demons to slay, and waifus to, well, I guess also slay.